Welcome everybody. This is our first Live with Liz and the IOCDF event for the new year. I am so excited to have you all join and excited for what's to come in 2021. Of course, there's still a lot of uncertainty. There's still a lot of anxiety. That's the way of the world right now, but it's also the way of our life for many of us with OCD and anxiety. So I am confident that you guys can handle it and that you can teach the world a lot of the skills that we've had to learn throughout our life if we live with OCD or anxiety and have learned a little bit about leaning in and accepting uncertainty. So today we'll talk about that as we always do. We'll do some brief introductions and we will hop into questions that were submitted in advance. Of course, as always, if you have any questions, please submit them throughout today's talk on the right-hand side in the comments pane, and I will be sure to get to them. As we start today, I want to take a second to just say hi and welcome all of you. Please let us know who you are. Let me know who you are, where you're joining from, and say hello as we get started. Couple of updates and reminders. These are Live with Liz. And so what is Live with Liz? It's a bi-monthly segment that I do with the International OCD Foundation. Comes to you live right here at 12 p.m. Eastern Time every other Wednesday. So we do the first and third Wednesday of the month, and it's really an opportunity for us to just connect. I take the time to answer questions that were submitted in advance, and I answer questions live and really just share some personal feedback, professional feedback, and what I can do to hopefully give some helpful and educational insight to life or treatment with OCD, anxiety, or related conditions. As always, this is not treatment. It's not intended to replace treatment. If you're feeling unsafe or suicidal, this is not a place to discuss crisis or for you to receive help in crisis. We want you to take the steps instead that you need to take to keep yourself safe, which are, if you live in the US, call 911, go to the local emergency room, or call the National Suicide Hotline. If you live outside of the US, you'll want to take the steps that you need to take by calling your hotline or going to your local emergency services or connecting with them. Couple of updates. You can go to iocdf.org/peace of mind. This is where you're going to find a list of all of the upcoming live streams. We'll talk about kind of the live streams that I do, the live streams that Ethan does, the guests that we're having on, the topics that we're going to cover. And this is also the place where you can submit questions. So as you know, I always start this segment with answering questions that were submitted in advance. And you might think, well, how are people doing that? This is how. You can go right there and submit questions that you have, but also stay up to date on our schedule and what we're doing. Another reminder, the IOCDF Online Kids and Family Conference, which is a virtual event specifically for young kiddos, is happening at the end of this month. I can't believe it's already here. So just a few weeks away. It's January 30th through the 31st, and it's for ages 4 to 10. We get a lot of questions about younger kiddos with OCD and what support's available, what resources exist. And so this is a resource specifically for them. So ages 4 to 10, you can go to iocdf.org/OCD camp, which you see listed right here. Thank you, as always, to our back-end folks. Today it's Chelsea Clifton helping us. Often it's Chelsea or Fran, and they're the people that do all the behind the scenes to make these live events happen and keep us on track. So thank you for all of your help to Chelsea and the amazing IOCDF staff. As we start our first Live with Liz of 2021, I really want to do that. I want to take a second to say thank you for all of you who attended and connected with this amazing OCD community so much in 2020. And I'm so excited for the connections that are to come in the new year. I also want to take this as a brief opportunity for us to connect and think about what you guys need. What do you want to see more of? What do you feel like we don't give enough of? Or what content do you feel like would be really useful for you? Let us know. Send us that information, submit it through that page, iocdf.org/peace of mind, so that we can make sure we're bringing content that you are looking forward to hearing about or having access to. Hi, everybody. So good to see you. Hi, Michael. Doing well. Great to see you. Hi, Alette from Israel. Hi, Raghu from India. Love having so many people from across the world. Hi, Deirdre, Angel, so many. Nicole from Chicagoland, from Canada. 2 from Canada, Lindsay and Angel, Sylvia from Belgium, Meryl from Pennsylvania, San Antonio, and others. Look at that. It's amazing. We're seeing this amazing worldwide and global reach, which is exactly why we do what we do. We're so grateful for technology and for the ability to connect with people around the world, hopefully providing effective resources and support. So if you have ideas on how we can do that better, please let us know so that we can do so. So hi from Austin, good to see you. So let's hop in. Let's go ahead and hop in with the questions that were submitted in advance. And as always, you can submit comments on the right-hand pane with any questions that you have for today. I want to start though, before we hop in, with some basics. I realize that oftentimes I just jump in and I start using acronyms and talking about different content, assuming you've watched all of the live streams. But now that we're starting over in 2021, there may be many of you that this is your first time joining. So let's talk a little bit about some of the acronyms that are most commonly used. And Chelsea, if you don't mind, you can display them on the screen with the definition as I kind of say them out loud. So the first one, sorry, one of my New Year's goals actually is to drink more water, so I'm engaging in that a little bit, but really just because I'm out of breath. OCD. So OCD, when we say OCD, we're speaking about obsessive compulsive disorder. Many of you know what OCD is, much too candidly, much too personally. Many of you live with OCD, but some of you may not totally understand what OCD is. You may be kind of in this place where you're trying to understand if OCD is what you're living with and if it is your diagnosis or not. So how do we break it down? So OCD is obsessive compulsive disorder. Obsessions, which are unwanted intrusive thoughts. Compulsions, which are repetitive behaviors that we do in an effort to alleviate the anxiety and distress caused by our obsessions. And then it becomes a cycle, right? That's where the disorder comes in. It becomes something that interferes with our life, something that causes disability and distress. And so it's obsessions, unwanted intrusive thoughts, compulsions, repetitive behaviors, or rituals. Both together make up OCD. Now, compulsions can be outward compulsions, such as hand washing, going back and forth through thresholds, all sorts of things like that. But it can also be mental compulsions. So things like ruminating, saying a prayer, trying to remember a situation perfectly, seeking reassurance to make sure we didn't do something wrong or that something bad might not happen. All of those things serve OCD. They give it more power and in turn give more power to the OCD cycle, which often continues. So obsessions, compulsions. CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a specific treatment intervention that is used for most anxiety disorders. So it is the most effective and evidence-based treatment for OCD. For OCD, we'll talk about the specific type of CBT, but for all sorts of disorders. So generalized anxiety disorders, substance use disorders, eating disorders, PTSD. And of course, within the CBT realm, there's some specific treatment modalities that we will use for different disorders. And so you'll hear us use the acronym ERP, Exposure with Response Prevention, also known as ERP quite frequently. ERP is the specific form of treatment, behavioral treatment, and a behavioral therapy intervention that we recommend for the treatment of obsessive compulsive disorder. It's exactly what it sounds like. We engage in the exposures, so we do the things that we're afraid of that cause us anxiety, and we prevent the response. So we no longer engage in that ritual or that compulsion that we were previously doing to make ourselves feel better. So those are some basic acronyms I want you guys to be aware of as we throw out and use, because we'll use them frequently. Now, there's a lot of other ones. There's acceptance and commitment therapy, also known as ACT, that is not used as ACT, but it's used as ACT. And there's lots of other ones, DBT, which is a specific treatment often for personality disorders, and all sorts of acronyms we'll use. But the ones I talk a lot about are CBT, ERP, OCD. I want to make sure we understand that. ERP is the most effective treatment, behavioral therapy treatment for obsessive compulsive disorder, and it works wonders. It can change lives. I know it has certainly changed mine. All right, quick overview. Hi, everybody. Thank y'all for joining. Oregon, South Louisiana, Delaware. Great to see everyone here. So let's start. Can those suffering from OCD have difficulty leaving emergency situations like potential fires due to their compulsive checking? This is an interesting question, and I think the short answer would be yes, but of course it would depend. I think that sometimes when we are in an emergency situation or distressed, we might actually be able to push through some of our OCD behaviors because there's something else more pressing, right? While OCD and anxiety might be really triggering and anxiety provoking, I would hope that we're able to dismiss or at least able to kind of resist the OCD anxiety that's caused in these emergency situations, because there's something else that's much more prevalent, right? If there's a fire or an emergency, that needs to take precedence over OCD fears for sure. And we actually see similar things of individuals where you're with somebody, maybe you're on a first date, or maybe you're with new friends, and you may be less apt to engage in the typical compulsions or behaviors that you might frequently do because there's some embarrassment or some anxiety compared to when you're with someone like family members who feel more safe and maybe have seen a lot of your compulsions more frequently, and there's a more comfortable, like you have a more, like the comfortability level is higher to engage in exposures around that. So certainly people with OCD can get stuck checking at any point in time. So we would want to absolutely support that person, especially if there's an emergency situation. We would need to engage in ways that would be different if there's not an emergency situation, like literally pulling them or getting them out of those situations to keep them safe, because safety is first. But checking behaviors can absolutely interfere all across the board at any point in time. Next question. I'm a parent of a teen with OCD. He sees a counselor and has been helped through CBT and ERP. He's been managing his symptoms quite well until about halfway through 2020. He's now quite resistant to fighting back the OCD and argues that it isn't OCD and that he wants to do these things like excessive homework, excessive instrument practice, redoing assignments that have already been graded. However, we can see that he is miserable while doing these. We understand that he needs to be increasing in charge of making decisions and how he uses his time, but do we just allow him to do all this OCD-imposed work? Do we let him run himself into the ground? Does that encourage and strengthen OCD and give it more power? How do we help him? What should we do or not do? This is a great question. There's a lot of questions within it. So let's start with the reality of being a parent of somebody with OCD. When you're a parent, you are much probably more in tune and able to witness what's happening than sometimes those of us when we're in the middle of it, right? It's hard when we feel a bit blinded or stuck. And even if we can recognize it as OCD, it may feel so real or so scary, or the fear may be so intense that we might not be able to separate to say we want to work on it because the anxiety around working on it might be so strong. The second piece is that when you are a parent of a minor with OCD, you are at a place where you have the ability to push treatment more now than you'll ever be able to do in the future. So once they turn 18, you can recommend and encourage and support them in getting treatment, but it's very hard to require it unless safety is at risk. Being able to take any steps to require it is almost impossible compared to if they're a minor. You're able to schedule appointments and have them go, right? Like you are able to make more of those choices. And so I think it's really important that you do what you can as a parent when you see that the child is suffering and needs help. While you have more ability and more control to push treatment, I would encourage you to consider pushing it, but pushing it with the right providers. So if somebody has a healthy rapport, they're working with an OCD specialist, somebody who really understands OCD, it's our job as the OCD provider to build that rapport and help the patient see that, yes, it might feel like this OCD is actually helping you, and that it's one of the reasons you're doing well in your musical practice or doing well academically. Look at what it's taking away. Look at the impact it's having on your life, and let's think about ways where you can still be very successful yet not be overcome by your OCD. And so I think that's a provider's need as well. As far as should we just let them do all the OCD behaviors? It's a hard spot to be in, because as a parent, how do you stop somebody from ritualizing, right? You can't necessarily stop me from doing it. I have to want to stop. I have to see the value in stopping, and I have to be committed to that. As a parent, you can't walk around and micromanage every single compulsion or every behavior. And in fact, I think the individual needs to make those decisions on their own. They need to push themselves. And so I think, I think that there's not a rule book on this, right? There's not a pamphlet, there's not a handbook, it's not black and white. So you want to slowly and systematically encourage them to seek appropriate help and to seek appropriate support. But I also think as a parent, allowing them to just engage in compulsions, or maybe helping them with compulsions or being a part of them, that absolutely could become enabling and can give the OCD more power. We know that the more we ritualize, compulse, and avoid life, the more our OCD is going to interfere, the more chance it has to take over and to become problematic in our life. And so we have to figure out, how do we encourage them to seek appropriate treatment, to seek appropriate help? Because it's not just about helping them learn to manage their symptoms now. It's about learning and helping them learn the tools that they need now so that they can be successful in the future, right? It's not just about today and tomorrow and the hours it takes away from their life. It's about when they go to college, when they're independent, when they have a job one day, when they're, wanting to function independently. Can they do so without OCD making those decisions? It's so much better to immerse ourselves in the treatment earlier than wait until it gets worse and do it later. So whatever you can do to help encourage them. I also continue to recommend, as a parent, find support groups, find other parents, join networks and communities where you can connect with other parents, where you can have support as well on how to appropriately support them. Also, there is a wonderful program called the SPACE program. It's developed by Ellie Leibowitz, and it is a wonderful program that's actually specific for if the individual or the child doesn't want to go to treatment. It actually is a treatment protocol for the parents to specifically be able to help that child with OCD and anxiety. And so if they're really resistant, the other option as a parent is looking into the SPACE protocol, because it allows you to really be able to understand how to push the child, how to appropriately support them, and how to help get them the treatment that they need. You can go to, Ellie has a website that's specific for his SPACE program, and he lists providers who have been trained in this protocol there. Last question that was submitted in advance is, how can you best support a student with OCD without enabling? What are some appropriate accommodations? This is a really good question, and I certainly don't have all the answers, but I can tell you my personal feedback. When I was first diagnosed with OCD when I was 15, and I had gone to inpatient treatment and then was engaging in more intense treatment as well, I really struggled with school, with being on time, with getting there, with engaging in school appropriately, being able to stay accountable. And what my mom and my teachers knew is that if they just gave Liz total accommodations, it would also become enabling to my OCD. So for example, if I was allowed to be tardy every day, if I didn't get in trouble, if I was late to classes in between, if I didn't have any consequences around not doing homework, maybe when the urge to ritualize happened, I would be more apt to get stuck because there weren't consequences, compared to if I was pushed to still having to do assignments. Sure, perfectionism might be there, but I might have to address it more appropriately or be more motivated to appropriately address it if I in fact still had to turn that assignment in. And so I remember, for me, I met with my principal in high school, and I remember he sat down and said, Liz, how many tardies do you feel like you need that would be reasonable for us to say you can have this many excused tardies in the semester that would still push you to work really hard to be on time, but that would give you a little bit of flexibility if you were really struggling in the morning. And for me, it was hard. Sometimes I'd wake up at 5 a.m. and I'd be stuck ritualizing, and I'd get to school late. And it wasn't that I woke up late, but I was stuck ritualizing. But at the same time, how could I still push myself? And I am so grateful my principal took this approach versus an approach of just you can have unlimited excused tardies, because it was an opportunity to model what real life would be like down in the future, right? When I now, as a 30-year-old who works at a job and has meetings and groups and sessions and things I have to be on time to, I don't get free passes to be late. I can't just have an unexcused absence that is available at all times, right? I have to push myself, even if I'm struggling, even if I'm triggered, to get there on time, to be present for my patients, to be, to be not absent during meetings. And so I remember talking with my principal and saying, I think that if you allowed me to have 3 tardies per semester, that would be really helpful for me, 3 additional tardies, because what it would do is in the mornings, I would really have to weigh out, okay, how bad is my OCD this morning? Is it worth using one of those only 3 tardies that I would get? And what you would see happen is I actually wouldn't even use all the tardies in a semester, because I was having to push myself. I was having to be accountable, and that felt like a fair accommodation compared to complete accommodation. And so I think it's really important that we work to find that middle ground. What is fair and reasonable versus what is just complete and totally accommodating? Because can total accommodations also become enabling, right? I'm a big believer that we have to be pushed. We have to have some deadlines. We have to have some accountability despite our struggles and the difficulty, because it pushes us to keep working. It pushes us to stay on top of our symptoms and to try to manage them. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to have more accommodations at the beginning that lessen throughout time. Of course, that should be the case, right? Before I'm engaging, or when I first start treatment, I'm going to need more accommodations. Then as I get into treatment and I'm better managing my OCD, maybe I need little to no accommodations. And so it's really about what is still going to be challenging, but what's going to be feasible, what's going to push me, and what's going to hold me accountable in treatment. In my opinion, that is how we should understand and start to tailor accommodations versus free reign, because that could also just mean, hey, OCD, go ahead and be totally present and take control, and that's not helpful for anyone. So those are the questions that were submitted in advance. Hi, everybody. So good to see everyone. Have you heard of the SPACE program? Absolutely. So Kathy, that's what I just spoke about. I actually did a training on SPACE this year. I think it was really, really good. It's a wonderful program. I would highly recommend that as well. Hi, everybody. OCD is absolutely a bad brain disorder, and it does impact all of our lives. It's something we need more research, more education, more studying around. But what I will say is that there is effective treatment. And despite our OCD diagnosis, we can learn to manage our symptoms and live a successful life. It is about staying present in the moment and using mindfulness. That absolutely can be helpful. And it's my pleasure to be able to do these videos and do what we can to share some content and education. So for those of you who attended my last Live with Liz, it was right before the holidays, and I gave you guys a homework assignment. I asked everybody to spend a little bit of time thinking about what their values are and their goals for 2021, and to identify the OCD symptoms you needed to work on to be able to get there. I wanted to share some of the amazing values that were submitted. Some people shared values around investing in their relationships with their family members, their partners, their children. A lot of people shared cultivating friendships someone shared cultivating friendships in order to build support, inspiration, and laughter. Someone shared contributing meaningfully at work and being able to have meaningful work goals and outcomes. When we think about values, right? Values are, what are those things that are really important to us? And values shift and change, right? Depending on our stage of life. 5 years ago, when I wasn't in the same place I am, my values were very different compared to where they are now. And it doesn't mean one's better or worse. They shift, they change, right? Maybe my values now are about a healthy relationship and functioning relationship with my spouse, and being able to be present with family members, friends, nieces, nephews, being able to engage in and appropriately help my patients get where they need to be with OCD, right? Our values shift, our values change, but values are so important that we think about and continue to have at our forefront, because that is what we're fighting for. And then the second piece is I asked you guys to think about, what are symptoms that you need to address in 2021 that you're committed to addressing so that those values can become reality. Right? For me, if I am engaging in a lot of reassurance seeking, a lot of rumination, if I'm engaging in a lot of contamination rituals, it's going to take me away from my ability to be present, from my ability to be able to have that healthy functioning relationship with my spouse, to engage in meaningful mindfulness and fun activities with people and be present, or to help my clients appropriately, because I'm going to be stuck, right? I'll be stuck in OCD behaviors or rituals. So some symptoms people have shared is rumination, reassurance seeking, and lots of different ones. And so what I want to encourage you is, as we enter 2021, let's set those smart, meaningful goals. What are the values that we want to live by, right? What are some values that we have? Second piece is, what are goals that you have for 2021? What are some goals you want to be able to achieve that will help meet those values? Do you want to be able to go on a trip without OCD controlling it? Do you want to be able to be present and do something you've been avoiding for a long time? Do you want, what is it, right? What are some of those goals, tangible goals that we can work towards? And then the last is, I want you to identify the OCD symptoms that need to be addressed for those goals to be achieved so that you can be living that values-based life. Because what happens is, while the symptoms are at the forefront, we need to address them. I have found for myself that it is so much less challenging to engage in the ERP that I need to do to be able to address the symptoms if I have my goals and my values in mind. But if I wake up and my goal is just to fight OCD for the day, it's daunting, it's exhausting. Doesn't mean it's not daunting or exhausting when values are in play too. But what happens is those greater good goals, those reminders of what we're fighting for and why it's worth the discomfort, why the uncomfortability, uncertainty is something we're willing to lean into. We're able to lean into it a little bit more if those values and greater good goals are kept in mind. One of the questions that was just submitted is, how do you stay focused while doing ERP for mental obsessions and rituals? It's difficult compared to ERP for contamination and checking because it's in our head. This is a great question and one that we get quite frequently, where how do we prevent ourselves from doing mental rituals? So something like an outward compulsion, it can feel a little bit easier sometimes or less challenging to not engage in that ritual. Although I would push that if that is your current OCD, you would totally disagree. You'd say, no, I'd rather have mental compulsions, right? This is so hard. Because the urge or desire to just quickly go do a ritual, it feels like something that we could just quickly do it and feel better. The mental rituals are the same way, right? We can choose to mentally ruminate, reassurance, engage in prayers, whatever it might be. And it serves the same way as a hand wash does for contamination OCD. And so how do you stay focused? It's about leaning into uncertainty all the way, right? It's not about doing an exposure but then ruminating, right? That is the same as doing an exposure and washing your hands. It's about doing an exposure and not engaging in this mental ritual, which often also means leaning into uncertainty, right? When you don't engage in a contamination compulsion, the goal is not that we touch something that's contaminated and we just resist hand washing. Yes, that's kind of the principles, but the goal is that we resist hand washing and we accept the fact that our hands might be dirty, that we might be contaminated, that something might happen, right? It's about also accepting and leaning into that uncertainty despite the discomfort. Mental rituals are the same way. It's not just about not engaging in the mental ritual. It's not just about doing the exposure, but it's about doing the exposure, resisting any rituals, mental or outward, and leaning into the uncertainty. Accepting the fact that something bad may or may not have happened, right? Maybe that person is upset with me. Whatever the anxiety is around, and continuing to move on, continuing to live that values-based life. Thank you for the amazing questions. As always, today was fun. I love being able to share some insight and hopefully give you guys a little bit of good education. I see a lot of people asking about the conference, so I want to spend a second talking about it. The IOCDF conference is the International OCD Foundation who hosts these webinars. It is the only international OCD-specific foundation that really is kind of our governing body here in the US, certainly, and internationally, where there is amazing support, amazing education, and amazing resources. The IOCDF also hosts an annual conference. It's an annual conference for OCD this year. It's this summer in New York City, and it is specific for obsessive compulsive disorder. There are 3 legs at the conference, so research leg, so a leg for researchers, a leg for professionals, and a leg for individuals. The individual leg is broken out, so it's for family members, individuals with OCD. There's specific talks and events for children. It's a 3-day conference, and it is life-changing. It's a conference that I've been attending for most of my life that I've lived with OCD, so I think I started attending when I was 15 or 17, have been to over a dozen conferences at this point, and it is life-changing. I highly recommend attending if you can. Go to iocdf.org for more information. For those of you who aren't comfortable or who won't be able to attend our in-person conference this year, we will also be hosting an online conference in the fall. So you can also get more information on that conference, which I believe will be sometime around October or so, but it will be an amazing online conference. Last year, because of COVID, we had to pivot our in-person to online, so we delayed it to this year in the summer, where we're anticipated and hoping that we'll be able to host it in New York City. It is an amazing conference. It's a place where you can learn from leading experts across the world in our field, but also a place where you can truly build your OCD community. This is a community that has forever impacted and changed my life, and it started right here at the International OCD Foundation Conference. So I highly recommend looking into the conference and attending if you can. Last question, and then I'll wrap up for today, is do you think that some reassurance is good for people with pure O in the beginning, since the sufferer's ego is quite fragile at the time? This is a great question. And the answer is no, but maybe. So no, I don't think reassurance is ever helpful. I think that reassurance is a compulsion and that it feeds OCD. And overall, the goal is to get to zero, right? The goal is that we are not engaging in reassurance, because even though it feels like we really need that answer, we really need to know it, it's going to help us if you just tell us. One is never enough. One is too many, 1,000's never enough, right? We will want more, or we won't be satisfied. And oftentimes, even though we want that one layer of reassurance because we're going to feel better, we feel better, but it's temporary relief and it feeds OCD. I say maybe because the reality is that it should be slow and systematic. Treatment should be something that you develop your own personalized treatment plan with your OCD provider. And you slowly and systematically reduce and remove the reassurance, the rituals that you were previously getting. So it's not about overnight stopping rituals and reassurance, because you're right, going from 1,000 a day to 0 a day actually might not be feasible and can set us up to be extremely distressed. And so it's about slowly and systematically doing it in a way that makes sense. I hope this was helpful. I love you guys. You are an amazing community, and I know that you serve me in so many ways. I hope that I can serve you as well. Thank you as always for joining. I'm looking forward to 2021, the amazing community that we have to continue to grow. And I'm also certainly looking forward to ways that we are going to be able to continue to impact the OCD community and bring appropriate content and helpful content to you guys. This is live stream 1 of 2021. We have many to come. Please make sure you check out iocdf.org/peace of mind so that you can see all the upcoming streams and make sure that you attend the ones that you're interested in. Make sure you check out Just Ethan, which is led by my amazing other advocate, Ethan Smith, who I love and is a dear friend of mine. I know you'll get so much out of his amazing live streams as well. As always, please remember, help and hope are always available. Until next time, take care.